First of all, I'm going to apologize because I'm probably going to be sneezing and doing other things in this video. I mean, look at my eyes. For some reason, right before I started recording, I had a sneezing fit and my nose is running and it's going crazy for some reason. Maybe it's because what I'm going to be talking about, we have talked about before, but I become very passionate about some of these numbers and I get very frustrated about some of these numbers. And it's important that that you understand where to find these numbers, where to create a database in your mind, or at least know where to go to find some of these numbers. In fact, it is so frustrating. I'm going to have to bust open a Bundaberg for this one because we're going to go crazy. Hold on. Let's see if this one pops like the last one. Oh, wasn't bad at all. This is great audio, by the way, right? Okay. So, I recently followed a YouTube channel called Langley Outdoors Academy. And he brought to my attention, well, in one of his videos, that there was a couple of left-leaning news organizations that brought up some data that murder rate is the highest it's been in 28 or 29 years in the United States, which is a big deal, which made me travel down this rabbit hole. Now, I'll link the stories that he brought on his YouTube video. I'll link all this stuff in the show notes. And then, like I say, I jumped down this rabbit hole that is just so deep, and it made me start wondering about some of these cities with the highest murder rates, political affiliation of the mayors in the city, and I mean, a deep, deep rabbit hole. So hopefully I can keep this entertaining, interesting, and if you don't like what I say, that's fine, comment. But what I really want you to do is, if you can, first of all, follow my very poor English style of communication. But I want you to know where to find the data to where you can develop your own argument or develop your own understanding, so that if you ever have to debate or have a conversation with whoever, that you're coming in with a level of understanding. One thing that we are missing in the United States, particularly when it comes to the Second Amendment, is a good, healthy dialogue from both sides of the aisle. I honestly believe that it is a passionate thing for both parties, not just parties, with citizens of the United States. Whether you're pro-gun or anti-gun, both sides or all sides come from a very passionate position. And the problem when we come to an argument with a huge amount of passion is we tend to go blinded, meaning we feel like our information's correct and nobody else is. Or, sorry, see, my nose is, I'm telling you, I don't know what it is. I did have a pretty nasty cold a couple days ago, and maybe my sinuses just finally decided to drain. But first of all, a couple of these, three of the articles that Langley pointed out in his video were robarguns.com, The Trace, which, take that for what it's worth. Of course, that was a 2008 article, but they did update it with the 2020 statistics from the FBI, and JaminNetwork.com, which I don't know that too much about that one, but nonetheless, there were some pretty interesting articles. It's important to read and understand the information that they're giving you, and I'm not going to dive into that information. I'm actually going to send you to Langley Outdoors for his breakdown, because he goes through that with far more in depth than I'm going to. But let's talk about the rabbit hole I jumped into. Okay, let me scroll down here, because my show notes are a page and some long, which, if you've ever seen my show notes before, which you haven't, that's a lot. That's a lot of information that I want to break down. Okay, let's first jump to the top 20, shall we say, deadliest cities in the United States, homicide rate-wise, okay? Now, I know that's not exactly, doesn't have to mean gun homicide, but violent homicides, okay? And you might be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised, by what these top 20 cities are. Now, I didn't just go through the city. I decided to find out who the mayors were of this city, when they were elected, and what political affiliation. Now, I know that probably sounds like a blindside to the Democrat Party, and honestly, I think it proves more than what they want to admit to. But I promise that was the chair. I promise. All right, let's actually go in reverse order, okay? Because this will be the most fair avenue I can go down. And some of these mayors' names, one in particular, is going to be hard for me to pronounce. I'll probably butcher it. But I apologize. My nose is just running like crazy. All right. Going from 20 to number 1, most violent homicide-rated cities or whatever, okay? Starting with Stockton, California. Okay, now this mayor is pretty young. Kevin Lincoln. He was elected in 2021. So I don't know if it's fair to blame him, but there's probably some policies, whether it's policing or something involved in the city of Stockton, California, that's allowing violent crime to continue. There's maybe some poor policies in the police departments, maybe some release stuff in the jails where they can't retain criminals. Who knows? Okay, but Kevin Lincoln, number 20 in the top 20 violent cities, Stockton, California. He's a Republican. All right, number 19 is the mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma, G.T. Bynum, I guess is his name. That's what I wrote down anyways. Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was elected in 2016. So some of this does fall on his shoulders. Mayor since 2016, and yeah, he's a Republican. Okay, so now we have 2 Republicans in the top 20 of the violent cities. Now, this is where things change, and maybe some of these cities won't surprise you, but maybe their ranking in the top 20 may. Jacob Frey, mayor of Minneapolis, he was elected in 2018. That's number 18 in the top 20. Number 17, Columbus, Ohio, Andrew Gittner. He was elected in 2016. And one thing I noticed as we go through these elections, since they've been voted in there, a lot of these happened around the same time period. All right, 16, I cannot pronounce this dude's name. Wade Capsalu from Toledo, Ohio, Democrat, elected in 2016. 15, Nancy Vaughn, Greensboro, North Carolina, since 2013. Ras Baraka, New Jersey. We know New Jersey has issues with private gun ownership, and maybe that's why the homicide rate's so high there. Mr. Baraka was elected in 2014, and yes, he's a Democrat. Number 13, Libby Schaaf, Oakland, California. California is, ranking pretty good here, actually. She was elected in 2015. Byron Brown, Buffalo, New York, 2006. Number 11, Joe Hogsett, Indianapolis, 2016. Number 10, Muriel Bowser, D.C., since 2015. Coming in number 9, inside the top 10, believe it or not, Lori Lightfoot. We all know who she is, Chicago, Illinois. And yep, she's a Democrat, elected in 2019. She's just ran, she says the only way to solve crime in her city, I heard this today actually, was for her to get reelected. But since she's been mayor, there's been a drastic increase in violent crime in Chicago. Let's see, number 8, Aftab Pureval, I guess, Cincinnati. He was elected just in 22. Cavalier Johnson, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is number 7. In 21 is when he was elected. Quinton Lucas, number 6 in the most violent homicide-ridden cities. Kansas City, Missouri. Yep, Democrat. And he was elected in 2019. Justin Bibb, Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, we're inside the top 5 most violent homicide-ridden cities now. Cleveland, Ohio. He was elected in 2022. So maybe he doesn't have a lot to blame to take here, but maybe the previous administration does. Number 4, Memphis, Tennessee, Jim Strickland. He was voted in 2016. Number 3, Mike Duggan. It makes me think of somebody else with the last name of Duggan. If you know your YouTube stuff. Man, what happened to my mic? Holy smoke! Sorry about that. Mr. Duggan, Detroit, Michigan. Yep, friendly city, right? Brotherly love. 2014 is when he was elected. Number 2, LaToya Cantrell, New Orleans. Now, New Orleans has not been a stranger to this violent city list. She was elected in 2018. But number 1, and maybe this surprises you, maybe not, St. Louis. St. Louis has the highest homicide rate in the United States. Tishaura Jones was elected in 21, so she may not have a lot to blame with St. Louis, but I'm guessing some of the administration previous and some of the rules they've given to their retention of criminals and policing issues have caused problems. Okay, so why did I even bring up this list of the 20 deadliest cities in the United States? Great question. Let's see if I can pull up. I want to make sure that you get this information as much as possible. Let me make sure I get this link right here. Oh, I hope I copied this link. I may not have. I'm gonna have to dig it up. Okay, so now that was see, I can't remember find the link now. Dang it! I was on a roll, right? So when we go back to the murder rate being so high in the last 30 years, some of the problem is happening in these inner cities. Okay, now this might get a little dark and unpleasant at times because we need to understand and we need to admit and we need to address the issue that death by firearm in total, that number is super high, right? But a lot of the times when the left cites death by firearm, they include suicide rates. Now in the United States, the suicide rate has actually gone down over the last few years. It's still like, I think 51 or 52%. I'll have to look again. It was in the 60% not too long ago. But the majority of people committing suicide with firearms are old white men. Now, you can say whatever you want that, yeah, it's just something to do with the white dudes, right? But it's men over the age of 70, almost always white, statistically. But the problem, what's killing the rest of the people with firearms, when you take out the suicide statistics, it's minorities in deep urban cities. Now, we just went through a list of 20 cities in the United States that have the highest homicide rates. Number 1, St. Louis, New Orleans, Detroit. These are all cities with problems with gang violence. And then they compound the issue of reduction of police budgets or changing in policing behaviors that reduce the ability to keep criminals incarcerated. We're seeing that in New York. If you look at the violent crime in New York's increased dramatically. They've let people out the same day, right? This isn't a new issue, or I guess I should say that part is a new issue, but the reality is a lot of the gun crime is being caused in gang violence. The other thing you need to understand, and if you go through all these links that I'm going to share in the show notes, they're including police-involved shootings in the gun crime. Why is that a big thing? Why is that important to understand? Because there's a percentage of that should not be included in gun crime if they're police-involved shootings. Cops are not committing homicides. Okay, there might be a few bad apples in the bunch. I do understand that. But I think that's a small minority of what's really taking place when it comes to homicide. When we're seeing death by homicide, especially in these deep urban cities, it's gang violence. It's gang violence. And if you go through some of this other data that I think I shared in some of these links, there's a huge portion that comes from cartel use, especially when you get down to the southern states. I'm going to share some data from the FBI and the ATF about the type of firearm used in some of these homicides. And yes, full autos do fall in a small percentage of those homicides, but there are full autos. There's that a bug on my microphone? What the heck? Oh, maybe it's my hands moving. But there are some full autos that I believe are coming across the border or being stolen from people that are not securing them properly. If you're going through the rigmarole, the red tape, the amount of frustration and ridiculous cost to purchase a full auto, you are not going to commit a crime with that firearm. All right, so we've just gone through all of those reports. Okay, another thing that's important to understand is where are these guns being purchased? Okay, if firearms have been the increase of firearm purchase has gone up dramatically over the last year. A ton. Let's see if I can find this here. Firearms Commerce Report from the ATF. Okay, let's pull this up here. Maybe. Okay. Now you can download this. You can jump on the ATF's website and download this. Again, I'm going to share the link. But this gives us a report from, it looks like 1986, which is awesome. This is actually a pretty interesting report from the ATF. There's a lot of information on here. I'm going to take a drink for just a second. I get passionate about this kind of stuff. All right. Manufacturing reports, exports, imports. I mean, there is so much data on here. It is awesome. Import applications. Let's see. I really want to go by state. That's a different. Let's see. Where's my by state purchase? Nope. That's the darker side of the show coming up later. Nope. That's crime rate. Let's scroll down. Sorry. Very unprofessional. Murder, crime rate. Oh, gun ownership by country. Oh man, where is my... Let's see, is that it? Oh, I probably didn't. Dang it. I probably didn't. I'm going to have to dig up that. Let's do this right now. All right. While I'm looking for this information. Gun ownership by state. What I should have done is just gone through my search history, right? Nope, that's not what I want, actually. Well, this makes it fun. Sorry about that. Nope, not downloads history. It doesn't even show I looked it up. That's weird. Well, dang it. Okay, I'm going to have to find that, and I'll show it in the reports later. But I went through gun purchases by state. Maybe I'll just try that again. To see if that correlated with gun violence, right? Let's see. Not every town. They always have so much fun information, right? Let's see. Dang it. I wish I would have saved that. I thought I did. It's not the crime rate statistics. Oh, that was from a previous show. Anyway, forget about it. Okay, we'll get to it later. So, gun purchase by state. Utah had the highest purchase by state per capita. And then it was a bunch of other conservative states. So it doesn't really correlate with the violent crime history in the United States as well. So it doesn't mean that more guns equal more crime. So what is causing the problem with crime in these inner cities? That's up for you to decide. That's up for you to do more homework. It is very frustrating when you hear that from the far left that says, yeah, the more guns equal more crime, and that's just the way it is, and we need to get rid of everything. That's not a fair argument. The other thing I was curious is what are the leading causes of death in the United States? Because surely, if you listen to the anti-gun people, the extreme anti-gun people in the United States, they're going to tell you that guns kill more people than anything else. But that surely isn't the case. So I jumped up on this is from the CDC. In 2019, this was the most recent figures I could find. So the leading cause of death, oops, I already scrolled past it, is heart disease, and then cancer, and then COVID-19 in 2020. So 19 and 20. So this graph has both. So still, heart disease is number 1, cancer number 2, unintentional injuries, it doesn't define what those unintentionals are, stroke, respiratory disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, and kidney disease are those top 10. Guns are not in the top 10, despite what they're trying to tell you. Okay? Let's see. So now the problem is we talked a little bit about suicide, right? And let's see, is this the one I wanted to link to? No, but this one we can still talk about a little bit. This is from the AP in New York, okay? So across the sources, right? They say they've looked at since 28 years, over 1 million people have lost their lives to gun violence. Again, they're pooling in suicide and police-involved shooting. Is a police shooting violent? Yeah, probably. Is a suicide by gun violent? Yeah, probably, but it's not violent crime. Okay? Now, you can debate the police thing, whether that's violent crime or not. I'm guessing the bad guys chose the terms of the relationship with the police, and maybe that's violent crime or not. I guess that's up to you. We can pool it in there if you want, but that still doesn't give us this drastic problem that they're trying to tell us. Because again, half of those deaths are suicide. Now, how do we rate across the world? Now, there's some pretty cool graphs that I'd found, some interactive graphs. Murder rate by country in 2022. Now, some of these, you got to be careful when you go to some of these graphs, because not every country is going to report crime the same way. And when you go back to John Lott and I can't remember that other guy that was going through violent crime in 2011, they went through this big report and they tried to discredit John Lott and raise this other guy up. Anyways, the problem is in the reporting, gosh, I keep hitting my mic. Sorry about that. The problem is with some of these reports and graphs that you look on online is not every country is going to report the information the exact same way. It just doesn't happen. That's why you can get these crazy violent crime rates in some countries, and in a country that you think would be more crazy has very little violent crime. It's because what they're calculating is violent crime, or maybe things aren't getting reported because people are scared to report the crime or whatever. There's a lot of variables in this data. So take it how you will. So murder rate by country in 2022. Again, you need to understand that we have more guns, more firearms, privately and legally owned than any other country in the world. I think that's fantastic. You need to understand that within our Constitution, we are granted those in our Constitution as a right. Other countries had those granted as a privilege. That's a very big and important distinction you need to understand in our Constitution. It is a right, not a privilege. A driver's license would be an example of a privilege, and it can be revoked at any time. It is not constitutionally guaranteed. But our freedom of speech, religion, protest, bearing arms, there's a series of them, and I encourage you to go through and read what those rights are in the Bill of Rights so you know, okay? All right, back to this. Murder rate by country. Queso, not the cheese. In the United States, our homicide rate per 100,000 is 4.96, higher than it needs to be, right? We can jump up to Canada, it's 1.76. Okay, so we're 3 times higher than Canada. Okay, well, let's jump down to our friends from the South. The homicide rate in the country of Mexico is 29.7. But we don't hear about that, right? We don't want to talk about that because they don't have a gun problem in Mexico. But they do. They have a major gun problem, and it's also linked to the cartels and a massive level of violent crime. Okay? It's important you understand this. Again, 4.96 United States. What about Brazil? 27.38. Okay? Now let's jump over to the pond. Now, you also got to understand, now this is a per capita number, okay? So England has a 1.2 homicide rate. Okay, that's pretty good. But what about violent crime? What about home invasions? There's other things that are not calculated in some of these rates, okay? This is just murder rate. Okay, what about our friends in Russia? 8.21, still higher than the United States. Jump down to Australia, 0.89, pretty good. I've lived in Australia. I'll have you know that violent crime is an issue in Australia. I lived there, okay? Let's see, what are some of the other bash? South Africa, 36.4. Let's not visit South Africa. Let's see, what do we got here? Afghanistan, wow, it's only a 6.66. That's an interesting number. Let's see, Argentina is 5.32. Chile is 4.4. Still higher. Oh, well, I guess we're still higher. We're 4.9. Cuba is 5.5. Dominican Republic is 10.5. So as you start looking at these numbers, just in the murder rate, you'll understand that America doesn't rank very high in the murder rate across the world. In fact, Honduras is the most dangerous country in the world right now. They're at 61.7 per capita. And then Honduras, Venezuela, and they're counting us number 4, including the Virgin Islands, which I'd like to go a little bit deeper in those numbers. I didn't, as far as this is concerned, because it says we're 4.9. So I'm a little confused here. Where's Honduras down here? Now I can't find it. Come on, mouse. Anyway, America is not the violent place that they're telling us. Why? Because we have the means and ability to defend ourselves. Let's go to this one here, maybe. Come on, computer. All right, the last one was homicide. This is violent crime in the in the world, okay? Violent crime and homicide are not the same thing. Okay, this one actually pulled both of them up. But why does it show homicide and violent crime as the same number? That's interesting. Wonder why that interactive map isn't quite the same. I don't want to know. Oh, this one has everything. So let's go to serious assaults. Let's look at that one. Okay, serious assaults in the United States in the year 2018 was 246.84 per capita. Let's jump over to France, 375. But France is a civilized country. Now, UK doesn't give us any numbers. Let's see what Ireland has up here. 93.51. So they're considerably lower. It's pretty safe. But then we jump down to, what is this, Brazil, 274. More than the United States. So you need to go through, and I'm going to show you all these things. I got to stop doing this because it's probably really boring for you guys. And I don't have the intelligence to pull these up on the screen because, well, I'm pretty new at this whole thing with the video and the audio. Gun ownership by country. This is important. Okay? This is important. The United States owns nearly 400 million guns. So in this particular graph, it shows 393 million. I'm willing to bet that there's much more than that. Now, our military, according to this statistic, owns 4 million. So we're 10 times that in private ownership, which I think is a great thing. You can think of it what you may. I think it's important that we have more than the military to keep it at bay. You can't shoot down an F-16 with a, well, whatever. Law enforcement, which I'm sure this number is low. It says 1 million firearms are possessed by law enforcement. I'm sure that number is low. We jump down to Mexico. 16 million guns in civilian hands, 16 million. And then this does not count the cartels, I'm sure. Military has just under a million at 900,000, and law enforcement has 600,000 nearly. Let's jump over to Russia. I'm sure this number is correct. 17 million guns. Military has 30 million guns, and law enforcement is almost 2.5 million. Jump down to Australia. There's 3.6 million guns. Yes, you can own a gun in Australia. Still more than the military has, which if you understand the Australian military, it's very small. And 69,000 in police hands. France, 12 million guns, which I'm surprised in civilian hands. 500,000 in military and 500,000 in law enforcement. Excuse me. All right. And I think it's important that we jump to something else here that we touched on. Suicide is a major problem all over the world. Okay, and there's lots of things that can cause suicide. Financial issues, relationship issues, emotional issues. I don't even know all of them that we can talk about. There's a lot of things that can cause people to do terrible things to themselves. And I think we all understand that. But I think it's important that we understand how serious the issue is. And it's also important to understand that guns do not cause suicide. Guns are not a causation of suicide. They might be the tool or the implement used because of the finality of it. But that doesn't mean guns cause suicide. Okay? Suicide rates throughout the world, and I'll just link this to it. We're not going to go country by country. The real epidemic in the United States, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, is there are a lot of social and economic issues that are causing heartache and frustration and pain within our society. With that frustration and pain becomes a lot of desperation. And people feel like they have to do desperate things. Whether that's rob to survive, whether that's to beat somebody up to make them feel better, whatever. I don't know what's wrong with these people individually. But I believe that the level of hate and anxiety and disregard for human life has been elevated and amped up over the last, since 2016, we had an incredibly low rate of violent crime. Since 2016, it's climbed rather drastically. And then it kind of dropped a little bit towards the end of Trump's term, and then it's jumped back up. Why? What's causing these issues? Well, we can look at economic problems, right? The dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. Because of that, bills are harder to pay. Families get more stressed out. There's more arguments in the home. Okay? There's a lot of issues going on. The other important thing we need to understand, and I know this is kind of an outside issue from the Second Amendment, is there's a problem with the nuclear family, meaning there isn't much of an example of a nuclear family anymore. There's not enough parents in the home being parents. They throw a device at their kids and let that be the babysitter. There's nobody teaching right and wrong. And then what happens is these kids, when they get to school, they get filled with information that may or may not be correct, which is another problem because that divides people into tribes, which puts a wedge in society, and this Group A and Group B don't get along, but they think they're right, and they're going to be as loud as they can to get their point across. There is a civil problem in the United States. There is a hate problem in the United States. There is a lack of God, in my opinion, a lack of values. Whether you don't believe in God, we can believe in values that this country was founded on, and those values are being diluted or discarded, creating a void where hate and anger and racism or inequality or whatever you want to call it is being replaced and put in the place where those values once existed. And when we create angst and anger and hate, it breeds violence. Whether you want to admit it or not. It's not a gun. It's not a knife. It's not a bomb. It's not a car. It's a human condition that needs to be addressed. Now, with suicides, we can talk that there might be some mental health issues, which I believe is a huge problem in the United States. And I think we're seeing more and more of that very prevalent across the United States. When people have psychological issues, they're going to do unhealthy things to themselves and to other people. Now, we're not going to get in the discussion of do we need to build asylums or hospitals or whatever. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But the important thing is we need to be having these conversations. Gun violence, yeah, it's an issue. But it's not the issue. It's what is causing the violence. What is pushing people to make themselves into mass murderers? What is the issue? One problem is they want to be famous, and they'll go out doing whatever they can to be famous. We need to stop idolizing that information. We need to stop creating martyrs. Because whether the media wants to do it or not, by plastering their name all over the internet, it makes these kids think that they can be famous one last time, and they'll be known for something. That's an issue. The other problem is forcing these kids to think that, well, the world's going to end, that your parents don't know any better, or whatever. All this stuff, they're being filled with negativity instead of where in the home they should be taught right principles. They should be taught, even if you don't believe in God, right? I say that all the time. There are values in the American society, traditional American values, that support peace and prosperity across the whole population. And those are being removed. You tell me the last time your kid talks about doing Pledge of Allegiance in school. My kids still do it, thankfully. But it's going away. We go to football games, high school football games, sports, whatever. We do a lot of high school sports. We do the Pledge of Allegiance at the games. I watch each one of those kids across, whether it be basketball, football, or whatever. I watch these kids. I know what some of these kids are being taught because they stand and they're patient. They put their hand over their heart and they give the Pledge of Allegiance. And then there's other kids that are goofing off and doing all sorts of stuff. Me, that pisses me off. But you know what? Whatever. But that tells me that there's a segment of patriotism, which has now become this evil word that has been lost in their home. And if that's being lost, then what other values are being left out? And what other things are being brought in? We as gun owners need to have some hard conversations. Now, I'm not saying we need to give up gun rights, because we do not need to give up any more gun rights in the United States of America. Our Second Amendment is black and white. Our Second Amendment is inclusive to all citizens of the United States, no matter your color, your creed, your sexual orientation, or whatever. It is a right to you as a United States citizen. It is your right to defend yourself. It is a right, even above health care. And that might frustrate people too. It is your right as an American citizen to stand up for what you believe in, not to be told that what you believe in is racist or whatever. What are you doing to preserve your rights? What are you doing to give? What are you doing to help your children understand what this country was founded on, why it was founded, what we fled, and why we created what we have? because they are not getting that in school. What are you doing to be not only a friend, which, whatever, we're not going to talk about that, but a parent to your children? I understand that families get broken up. There's a lot of single parent homes out there. I do understand that. Okay? We see that in our family, our extended family. But what are you doing as a parent? A parent. To help teach your kids the importance of freedom, the importance of choice, and then the importance of accountability and taking ownership of the choice that you made. Because they are not getting that in school. They are being taught to be victims. And once we create victimhood in the United States, the idea of freedom gets thrown out. Because our choices suddenly become actions against somebody else's feelings. Freedom is greater than feelings. Okay? You might not like that, but that's just the way it is. Understand why the Constitution is written. If you don't know how to teach your kids about this stuff, there are countless resources out there. If you don't know understand how to talk to your neighbor about firearms, there are countless resources out there. I mentioned John Lott earlier. Google some of his reports. There's some great books on let's see, what was the one? Control by Glenn Beck, about gun control. This isn't about violence. Let's keep on this track before I jump track, because I do that way too much. Learn about your rights. Find some of the original documents, some contemporary information of the founding, so you understand why our founding fathers put in the Constitution what they did. They didn't just willy-nilly put stuff in because they felt like it. The Constitutional Convention was not one day. There's a reason why things are in the Constitution. There's a reason why things are written in order that they are. It's your responsibility to know that. Because you're not being taught, I'm not being taught it, and our kids for sure are not being taught. And if you want to preserve this country, if you want to preserve the rights of your children and grandchildren, you need to be learning it so you can be teaching it to them. Okay? Enough with that. Friends, your Second Amendment is under attack. Soon we're going to have a whole nother poop from the ATF about pistol braces. Okay? You need to understand something else. The president said that it is ridiculous that in this country you can still buy a semi-automatic in this country where there's no use for them. I'm just paraphrasing. He didn't say fully automatic. He said semi-automatic. Now you might think, oh, he was thinking fully auto. No, I think he was saying exactly what he meant. In the assault weapons ban, we've talked about it before in the show, it's any semi-automatic firearm. Okay? Any. Rifle, handgun, shotgun. Any semi-automatic firearm. I don't think they have a slip of the tongue, otherwise it wouldn't be written in the bill. We have been passive way too long. You need to get involved, not violently. This is not a call to violence, but it is a call to action. Get on the phone to your state representation. Quit sitting on your laurels thinking it's not going to happen, because it is happening, and it has been happening for years, because we felt like the NRA had our back over the last 10 years, and they have done nothing but stab us in the back that we gave them. And they've been happily taking our money the whole time. Find the groups in your state, the Second Amendment groups, that actually put your money where their mouth is, that will actually stand up for you. Firearms Policy Coalition. In Idaho, we have the Second Amendment Alliance. I guarantee in your state where you live, there are some fantastic Second Amendment groups. Stop sending the NRA money. Stop. They're wasting it. And I know that's going to hurt a whole bunch of people's feelings. But when you start looking into what the NRA has been doing with your funds, you should be pissed. Find a better place to put it. Somebody that's actually going to use it to protect your rights. Okay? Again, I'm going to put all this stuff in the show notes. I got to find that firearm purchase information that I was talking about earlier, because that was pretty fun information, and I'm really frustrated that I don't have this in here. I wonder if I put it somewhere else in my show notes, because it was fantastic. On the brighter side, you are good enough. You're good enough to share your passion of the Second Amendment. It starts with just inviting somebody to go shooting. And from there, you can take classes, you can help them take classes, whatever. But take somebody along your journey. We need to make firearm ownership normal again in the United States. The left has pushed very, very hard to make us outliers, to make us crazy people, to make us look like extremists. And for the most part, they've been pretty successful because they have the media behind them forcing this information out. There are 400 million guns in civilian hands in the United States. Again, I think that number is probably higher. If legal gun owners, man, I can't even talk. If legal gun owners were the issue in the United States, we would have a much greater issue. And honestly, I think we would have a bigger issue than we do now in violent crime if it wasn't for legal gun owners. In 2011, we've talked about this before, the CDC did a defensive gun use report, and they found that somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 times a day, firearms are used in defense. 1,000 and 3,000 times a day. Not a month, not a year. Now that tells me that we have a violent crime issue and people need to defend themselves. That exposes a big issue. But what it also shows is that guns save more lives than they take. And a huge number of lives that guns take are through suicide, and we need to figure out that issue. A gun is simply a tool, like a hammer, like a knife, like a car. By the way, all of which take more lives than an AR-15. It's not about the gun. It's about control. Get involved. Be heard. And be a good example of the Second Amendment. Be safe, guys. Take somebody shooting.